If you had told me 12 months ago that I would be standing in a dimly lit hallway, heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird, confessing the darkest parts of my soul to the man who owns the deed to my apartment, I would have told you that you were hallucinating. For the longest time, the rent was just a terrifying number that vanished from my bank account on the first of the month, and Arthur was just the shadow who cashed the check. He was the signature on the lease, the gray hair you saw taking out the recycling bins on Thursdays, a background character in the movie of my life. But the night the numbers didn't add up, the night the red ink on my budget sheet turned into a tidal wave, the script changed. I didn't just hand him an excuse. I handed him the only thing I had left to give, my vulnerability, my crushing isolation, and eventually, the parts of my heart I thought had turned to stone. Before I tell you how a dutiful wife and mother ended up crossing a line she swore she never would, I have to ask you something. I want you to pause for a second. Where are you right now? Are you driving down a highway in the rain? Are you folding laundry in a house that feels too quiet? Maybe you're hiding in the bathroom just to get 5 minutes of peace away from the kids. Tell me. I want to visualize you. I want to know I'm not just speaking into the void. I like to imagine you're sitting at a kitchen table, maybe with a cold cup of tea, staring at a bill you can't pay, just like I was. That connects us. That makes this real. My name is Elena. I turned 42 last month. For the vast majority of those 42 years, I was the definition of steady. I was the rock. I was the woman who remembered birthdays, the woman who clipped coupons, the woman who smoothed things over. I believed in the great unspoken contract of adulthood. If you exhaust yourself, if you follow the rules, if you swallow your complaints, the universe grants you safety. I thought stability was the prize for good behavior. But the universe doesn't care about your behavior. It cares about inflation. It cares about rising interest rates and stagnant wages. The slide into chaos wasn't a sudden cliff. It was a slow, grinding erosion. It was the price of eggs doubling. It was the electric bill jumping 30% in a bitter winter. It was my husband, Mark, losing his overtime at the logistics center, then losing his weekend shifts, then coming home with gray circles under his eyes, and a silence that filled our apartment like thick smoke. We stopped going out. Then we stopped buying meat. Then we stopped talking about money because every time we did, it ended in a fight or tears. We lived on credit, juggling balance transfers like circus performers, pretending the safety net was still there. The moment the illusion shattered wasn't dramatic. There were no screaming matches or slammed doors. It was a Wednesday. I was staring at the online portal for our bank, refreshing the page as if the pixels would magically rearrange themselves into a higher number. The rent was due in 48 hours. I had done the math on a notepad, then on my phone, then on the back of an envelope. The result was always the same. We were short, not by $20, but by hundreds. Mark was asleep in the bedroom. He had worked a grueling 10-hour shift and collapsed the moment he walked through the door. If I woke him up to tell him we couldn't make rent, I knew exactly what would happen. The panic would set in. The shame would make him defensive. He'd talk about selling his tools, or worse, asking his judgmental brother for a loan. I couldn't bear to see that look of defeat in his eyes again. I couldn't handle managing his emotions on top of my own terror. So I made a choice. A choice that felt like swallowing glass. I scrolled through my contacts until I found Arthur, landlord. My thumb hovered over the green icon. I felt ridiculous. I was a grown woman, a mother to a teenage daughter, and I was shaking like a child called to the principal's office. The phone rang. Once, twice, 3 times. I almost prayed for voicemail. Hello? This is Arthur. His voice was gravelly, calm, stripped of urgency. It was the voice of a man who had seen enough winters not to rush. Hi, Arthur. It's Elena from Unit 2B. Elena, he said, and I could hear the surprise. In 7 years, I had only called him when the water heater broke or the radiator hissed too loudly. Is everything all right? Is there a leak? No, I said, my voice tight. No leak. Do you have a moment? I need to speak with you about administrative things. I'm actually in the garden shed out back, he said. Fixing an old lawnmower. You can come down or I can wash up and come to your door. I'll come down, I said quickly. I needed to get out of the apartment. The walls were closing in. I'll be there in 2 minutes. Walking down the stairs felt like walking to the gallows. The building we lived in was an old, converted Victorian house, split into 4 units. It had creaky floorboards and smelled of lemon polish and old dust. Usually I loved that smell. That day it smelled like failure. I walked out the back door into the small communal garden. The sky was an overcast slate gray, threatening rain but not delivering it. Arthur was in the shed, the double doors propped open. He was wiping grease off his hands with a red rag. Arthur is a man hard to pin down. He's in his early 60s, I think. He has the build of someone who worked construction in his youth. Broad shoulders that have slumped slightly with time, hands that are thick and scarred, but a face that is surprisingly gentle. He wears flannel shirts regardless of the season and always smells faintly of sawdust and cedar. He looked up as I approached, his eyes narrowing slightly behind his wire-rimmed glasses. He sensed it. Animals smell fear, landlords smell insolvency. "Coffee?" he offered, gesturing to a thermos on his workbench. "It's fresh." "No, thank you," I said, wrapping my cardigan tighter around myself. I couldn't make small talk. If I didn't say it now, I would vomit. "Arthur, I don't have the rent." The silence that followed was heavier than the humid air. He stopped wiping his hands. He didn't look angry. He looked thoughtful, which was somehow worse. "You don't have it?" he repeated softly. "Not all of it," I whispered. Mark's hours were cut again. The car needed a new transmission last month, and we put it on the card, and I thought I could move some money around, but the grocery bill was insane, and I'm short. I'm significantly short. I waited for the lecture. I waited for the threat of eviction, the mention of late fees, the cold professional detachment. Instead, he leaned back against the workbench and crossed his arms. "You've been here 7 years, Elena. You've never been late, not once." "I know," I said, feeling tears prick the corners of my eyes. "I pride myself on that. I'm so embarrassed." "Don't be," he said. His voice dropped an octave, losing its business tone. "Look around you. The world is expensive. People are drowning. I see it with the other tenants. I see it at the hardware store. You aren't the villain here." I looked at the ground, focusing on a cracked paving stone. "I don't want to lose our home. My daughter loves her school. This is the only stability we have." Arthur sighed, a long, rattling exhale. He picked up a wrench, turned it over in his hands, and put it back down. "I don't want you to leave. Good tenants are rare. You take care of the place. You're quiet. You're respectful." He paused. "How much are you short?" I told him the number. He nodded slowly. "Okay," he said. "Here is what we're going to do. I'm not going to kick you out. I'm not going to add a late fee." My head snapped up. "You're not?" "No, but I can't just waive it, Elena. I have property taxes and maintenance costs." He looked at me, assessing. "I need help. My office, the room off the lobby where I keep all the building files and the receipts from the last 20 years, is a disaster zone. My wife, she used to handle the filing. Since she passed, I've just been throwing papers in boxes. I can't find anything. I need someone to organize it, digitize the important stuff, shred the junk." He looked at me with a tentative hope. "If you can give me a few hours a week organizing that mess, we can credit it against what you owe. We'll work out a payment plan for the rest. Does that sound fair?" I felt a wave of relief so potent it made my knees weak. That sounds incredible. Yes, I can organize. I'm good at that." "Good," he said. A small, genuine smile touched his lips. "Start tomorrow, say 10 in the morning while Mark is at work. I'll be there, I promised." That was how it started. It was a transaction. It was business. But transactions between people who are lonely have a way of becoming something else entirely. The next morning, I went down to his office. It was a small room with high ceilings and dusty velvet curtains. Boxes were stacked floor to ceiling. It smelled of old paper and the vanilla pipe tobacco Arthur sometimes smoked in the evenings. He set me up with a scanner and a laptop and left me to it, retreating to the basement to work on a cabinet he was restoring. For the first week, we barely spoke. I scanned, I filed, I shredded. But slowly, the dynamic shifted. He started bringing me tea, Earl Grey, hot, in a delicate china cup. "My wife's favorite," he mumbled the first time he set it down. "Seems a shame to leave them in the cupboard." I looked at him, the man I had promised my life to, and felt an ache so deep it felt like a bruise on my soul. He was there, but he wasn't. He was a silhouette. I wanted him to ask me how I felt. I wanted him to notice that I had worn a nicer blouse. I wanted him to ask, "Who holds you?" But he just wanted the salt. As the weeks went by, the office downstairs became my sanctuary. It was the only place where I wasn't mom, or wife, or debtor. I was just Elena, and Arthur Arthur was becoming the highlight of my day. We learned the maps of each other's lives. I learned that he had been married for 30 years to a woman named Clara, who died of a stroke 5 years ago. He told me about the silence of the house after the funeral, how the creaking floorboards sounded like accusations. I kept busy, he told me, tracing the rim of his teacup, fixed the roof, repainted the hall, built that gazebo in the garden. If I stopped moving, the grief would catch me. I know that feeling, I said. I keep moving so the fear doesn't catch me. We're a pair, aren't we? He chuckled softly, running in circles in the same building. One afternoon, I brought down a loaf of banana bread I had baked. He sliced it for us, his large, rough hands surprisingly delicate with the knife. We sat in the office as a thunderstorm rolled over the city. The sky turned black at 2 p.m., and rain lashed against the window pane like gravel. The lights flickered once, twice, and then died. The room plunged into gloom, lit only by the gray ambient light from the street filtering through the rain. Ah, Arthur sighed. The grid in this neighborhood is held together by chewing gum and hope. Do you have a flashlight? I asked. Better, he said. He fumbled in a drawer and struck a match. The flare of phosphorus was blinding for a second, and then a warm yellow glow bloomed. He lit a thick candle on the desk, then another on the bookshelf. The room transformed. The shadows softened. The stacks of paper looked less like work and more like ancient manuscripts. The air felt closer, intimate. I should probably go upstairs, I said, though I made no move to stand. Mark might worry. Mark is at work, isn't he? Arthur reminded me. And your daughter has that volleyball tournament. Right, I said. I forgot. Stay, he said. It wasn't an order, it was a plea. I hate sitting in the dark alone. It reminds me of, well, bad times. I nodded. I'll stay. We sat in the candlelight, the rain drumming a relentless rhythm against the glass. The silence between us wasn't empty. It was full of unspoken things. I looked at his face in the flickering light, the lines around his eyes, the silver in his beard, the way his shirt collar was slightly frayed. He looked solid. He looked like shelter. You know, he said, his voice low and rough, I look forward to these mornings more than I should. My heart skipped a beat. I do too, Arthur. It's dangerous, he murmured, to get used to someone. Why? He stood up and walked around the desk. He didn't stop until he was standing in front of me. He leaned against the edge of the desk, looking down at me. Because I'm an old man with a dusty house, Elena, and you're a young woman with a life upstairs. And every time you walk out that door, the house gets quiet again, and the quiet is getting harder to bear. I stood up. I don't know what compelled me. Maybe it was the storm. Maybe it was the months of feeling invisible upstairs. Maybe it was the way he looked at me, like I was a rare book he had found in the rubble. I'm not that young, I said, my voice trembling, and my life upstairs, it feels like I'm invisible. I walk through the rooms and no one sees me. I shout and no one hears. Down here with you, I feel real. You are real, he said. He reached out, his hand hovering near my face, asking permission. I didn't pull away. I leaned in, his palm cupped my cheek. His skin was rough, warm, calloused. It was the most grounding touch I had felt in years. It wasn't a demanding touch, it was a cherishing one. Elena, he breathed. Don't stop, I whispered. Please don't stop. He lowered his head. The kiss was tentative at first, a question asked in the dark. But when my lips met his, something broke inside me. A dam burst. It wasn't the frantic passion of teenagers. It was the desperate, hungry connection of two people who had been starving for a long, long time. It tasted of tea and longing and the smell of rain. I wrapped my arms around his neck, pulling him closer. He made a low sound in his throat and wrapped his arms around my waist, holding me tight, as if he were afraid I would vanish like smoke. For a moment, the debt didn't matter. The husband upstairs didn't matter. The guilt didn't matter. There was just the heat of his body, the scratch of his beard, and the overwhelming relief of being held. We pulled apart slowly, breathless, foreheads resting against each other. The candle flickered wildly in a draft. This changes things, he whispered into my hair. I know, I said. I can't be just your landlord anymore, and I can't pretend I don't want this. I don't want to pretend either, I admitted. I'm so tired of pretending. What do we do? He asked. I looked up at him. I don't know, I really don't know. We didn't go further that day. The power came back on with the jarring buzz of the overhead lights breaking the spell. We blinked, suddenly exposed in the harsh artificial glare. I smoothed my hair, my hands shaking. He adjusted his glasses, looking flushed and younger than I had ever seen him. I went upstairs. Walking into my apartment felt like walking onto a movie set where I no longer knew the lines. The familiar furniture looked alien. The wedding photo on the mantelpiece seemed to be looking at a stranger. That night, Mark came home. He complained about the traffic. He ate the stew I made. He fell asleep on the couch. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the rain that was still falling. I touched my lips. They still tingled. The next morning, everything looked the same, but the colors had changed. The sun filtering through the blinds seemed sharper. The sound of the coffee grinder was louder. I waited until Mark left. I waited until my daughter went to school. Then, I went downstairs. I didn't go to the office. I knocked on his apartment door. Unit 1A. Arthur opened it. He was wearing a fresh shirt. He looked like he hadn't slept. "I wasn't sure you'd come back," he said. "I had to," I said. He stepped aside to let me in. His apartment was cleaner than the office, filled with heavy oak furniture and shelves of books. It was a home. "Elena," he said, standing in the middle of his living room, "I need to say something before this goes any further. I'm not doing this because of the rent. You have to know that. If you never organized another file, if you walked away right now, I would still feel this way. I don't want you to feel obligated." "I don't," I said. And I meant it. The debt was the catalyst, but it wasn't the engine. I'm here because I want to be. I'm here because yesterday for 10 minutes I remembered who I was. He nodded, his eyes searching mine. "So where does this go? You're married." "I am," I said, "and that's complicated, and it's messy, and I'm terrified. But Arthur, I can't go back to being invisible. I can't go back to holding my breath until I pass out." He took a step closer. "Then breathe here. We didn't solve the world's problems that morning. I didn't pack my bags and leave Mark. Life isn't a movie. You don't just blow up your family on a Tuesday because you kissed the landlord. But something fundamental shifted. I started seeing Arthur every day. Sometimes we worked, sometimes we just sat and talked. Sometimes we kissed like teenagers in the back of the archives. It was an affair, yes. By every definition, I was cheating. The guilt was a cold stone in my stomach, but the happiness was a warm sun that I couldn't bring myself to block out. One afternoon, about a month later, Arthur and I were in the garden. He was showing me how to prune the hydrangeas. "You have a good touch," he said, watching my hands. "You're gentle." "I have to be," I said. "If I push too hard, things break." "Not everything," he said. "Some things you have to hold firm or they'll never bloom." He wasn't talking about the flowers. "Can I ask you something?" I said, pausing with the shears in my hand. "Anything." "Do you think I'm a bad person?" He took the shears from me and set them on the grass. He took my hands in his. "I think you're a starving person who finally found a crumb of bread," he said fiercely. "I think you're a human being doing the best you can in a life that gave you a raw deal. We find comfort where we can, Elena. Don't let anyone, especially yourself, tell you you don't deserve to be happy. Even if it's secret? Especially if it's secret," he said. "Sometimes the secret things are the most sacred." I went back upstairs that evening with dirt under my fingernails and a strange sense of peace. Mark was in the kitchen, looking at the bills I had left on the counter. "We're doing a bit better this month," he noted, sounding surprised. "The rent, it's handled?" "I'm working it off," I said calmly. "With Arthur, helping with the building." Mark looked at me. For the first time in months, he really looked at me. "You look different," he said, frowning slightly. "You look, I don't know, awake." "I feel awake," I said. "Well," he grunted, turning back to the fridge. "Whatever you're doing, it's working. Keeps the wolf from the door." He didn't know that the wolf was already inside, and that the wolf wasn't a monster but a man with kind eyes and a lonely heart. I don't know how this story ends. I don't know if I stay with Mark and let the resentment slowly calcify until we are strangers living in the same hallway. I don't know if I leave him and try to build something real with Arthur, risking the judgment of my daughter and the world. I don't know if this is just a season, a lifeboat to keep me afloat until the storm passes. But I do know this. I am no longer just a number on a contract. I am no longer just a mother or a wife or a debtor. I am a woman who is seen. I am a woman who is wanted. And for the first time in years, when I wake up in the morning, I don't dread the day. I look forward to the sound of the rain, the smell of old paper, and the touch of a hand that reminds me I am still alive. "So, tell me again, Where are you right now? Are you sitting in your car in the driveway, delaying the moment you have to go inside? Are you lying in bed next to someone who feels miles away? If you are, listen to me. You are not alone. The walls may be closing in, the bills may be piling up, and you may feel like you are disappearing, but you are there. And sometimes, help comes from the places you least expect. Sometimes it's the person holding the leash who ends up holding your heart. Whatever you do, don't stop fighting for the part of you that deserves to be seen. Even if it's dangerous, even if it's messy. Because feeling something, anything, is better than feeling nothing at all. I check my watch. It's 10:00 a.m. Mark is gone. The house is quiet. I can hear footsteps downstairs, a door opening, the faint rhythmic creak of the floorboards in the lobby. Arthur is waiting. I grab my keys. I check my hair in the mirror. I see a woman looking back at me who has secrets, yes, but who also has a spark in her eyes that hasn't been there since she was 25. I open the door. I step into the hallway, and I begin to descend the stairs, toward the complications, toward the guilt, but mostly toward the light.